What's good, ladies and gents? I am doing something a little bit different today. I've put together a presentation titled Develop Clarity of Mind for Success in Trading. Um, Basically, gonna go through some neurology and physiology, um, when put together creates the clarity of mind that's needed for trading. I'm pretty sure anybody that's been trading for any period of time realizes that some days they can see the market really easily and clearly, and then other days they're completely blind to it. And depending on which one of those is present, you'll either have a good day or you'll have a shit day. You'll either have, it's like you've got God mode switched on and the markets are easy to read, or you'll be trading like an infantile tit and just randomly button bashing until you end up sort of self-sabotaging or doing something stupid, blowing accounts or dipping into bad vices, etc. So we're going to go into sort of why that happens and how to avoid it and all that sort of stuff in this presentation. So starting off with the parasympathetic versus a sympathetic nervous system. You can also say nervous system regulation. So what is it? Your sympathetic, or the sympathetic state, is a fight or flight. That spikes stress and adrenaline. Parasympathetic is rest and digest, promotes calm, focus, and rational thinking. Simply put, it is the stress versus calm state. Why this matters: obviously, trading environments constantly trigger stress responses. If your nervous system sits in fight or flight, your decisions become reactive. So one of my favorite quotes of Uzi's is, "The best trades are always quiet." And yeah, simply put, whenever you're in a trade, the good ones are always quiet. And it's not because it's a good trade makes it quiet, it's because you are in a quiet state of mind, which means that the trade's more likely to go well. And this presentation is going to sort of touch on how to develop that and have it daily. So yeah, the parasympathetic system, or the parasympathetic versus sympathetic system, they are the two primary branches of the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary bodily functions. So you've probably heard of it, fight or flight. Basically a stress response. You'll know it if you, when trading, you hop into a trade, your heart's beating out of your chest, you're, reacting to every market movement, you're getting emotional, all this sort of stuff. It's because you're probably going to be in that sympathetic state, which, what happens, activates under stress. Your heart rate increases, body releases adrenaline, cortisol, etc. And it's basically your body protecting. It's like a threat detection system, and your body will go into this whenever it has a perceived threat. So the markets are unpredictable. That unpredictability constantly activates the nervous system. If you are sympathetically dominated, reacting to every price movement is likely, panic selling, all that sort of stuff. Whereas parasympathetic dominance, you'll be calmly analysing trades, following your plan, waiting for higher probability setups, etc., all that good stuff. There's a little bit of a hack towards the back end of the presentation on how to make sure that you're in, or how you can monitor whether you're in this state or not, and all of the slides and whatnot will be conducive to leaning more into a parasympathetic state for an overall, stress-free, calm, rational life and trading endeavor. So in order to achieve the parasympathetic state, all the good stuff, all the healthy stuff, deep breathing, stretching, short walks, meditation, physical movement, etc. You want to avoid overstimulation, news overload, late night screens, excessive caffeine, etc. Basically anything that puts stress on the system, stimulants, uncertainty, all that stuff. Next, dopamine and reward regulation. What is it? So, high dopamine spikes from instant gratification. Let me start again. High dopamine spikes from instant gratification lower your ability to tolerate stress and delayed rewards. Obviously, trading requires patience and emotional discipline. That's very difficult to have if you're constantly taking in instant or high dopamine spikes. So we'll touch first, ways to regulate it. You want to eliminate things, high spike activities, porn, junk food, endless scrolling, social media, drugs, alcohol, all of that sort of stuff. And you can you'll want to, in place of that, pursue effort-based rewards, exercise, learning, achievement, cold exposure, things like that. There's a little bit of a graph here, and that shows what happens when you're exposing yourself to high dopamine spikes. You've got the initial baseline there, and then you get a peak, and then comes a crash. And within the deficit, that's when you're going to have irritability, low motivation, brain fog, restlessness, etc., and also desire for another hit of stimulation. So that's where that gambler's mentality comes into it. You've come into the markets, which are they are pure dopamine, pretty much. Again, it's triggering the fight or flight response and all this sort of stuff. So if you are bombarding yourself with high dopamine spikes outside of trading, then your threshold is already going to be met. And then when you come into the markets, you're going to be dealing with, if dysregulated, chasing trades, boredom intolerance, emotional reactions, need for constant stimulation, basically chasing the markets and all that sort of stuff. Tying this into the previous slide as well, most people will be familiar with the analogy of the elephant and the rider. You might have the analogy of the monkey brain, the human brain, all that sort of stuff. This is how we separate those two systems. Overall, just again, we've got more slides to come, but it's basically leaning away from unhealthy dopamine, unhealthy habits, and leaning more into healthy habits to put the brain into a prime state in order to come at the markets and come at life from a primed state. Also, I think it's listed somewhere, but if you are constantly feeding yourself high dopamine as well, you will have a low you'll have low resilience to stress. So if you'll probably know this from personal experience, but if you spend time scrolling and all this sort of stuff, life seems more stressful. You're more likely to be irritated and all this sort of stuff by things that really shouldn't bother you. Essentially, you have the emotional resilience of a child. That's as a result of dopamine and being in that peak and everything being dysregulated. So something to surely pay mind to. So getting into the meat and potatoes of it, how to build sort of habit formation. Because obviously what is trading? It's repeating the same action over and over again, so you want to be repeating the same or the best behaviors so that you can build neural pathways. Why this matters? Because habits determine how you act under pressure. When the market moves fast, you don't think, you default to habits. So essentially, no matter how disciplined you are, whenever the market sort of is moving hectically and jolts you, you're going to switch most likely into that sympathetic state, and that's where your unconscious behaviors basically take the wheel. If you're not practicing good habits when you are in control, then you've got no hope of your monkey brain making the right decision. So a precursor in order to build those good habits, your dopamine and your nervous system need to be regulated well. So it's sort of a prerequisite. You can't build good habits if your nervous system's all over the place and if your dopamine's dysregulated. As on the slide, if your, how does this read? If your nervous system and your dopamine are unregulated, then you're going to have inconsistent discipline, emotional reactions, rule breaking, etc. If those things are strong and you're checking the boxes, then you're going to have like automatic risk management. You're not going to need to babysit yourself and all this sort of stuff because your unconscious is doing it for you. This is where what's the word? We'll come back to that. But consistent routines, controlled decision making, all this good stuff. Basically, you're in autopilot and you can rely on, I'm trying to provoke the word to come to mind, your intuition. There you go. So most people, at least when I first started, was wondering how you can get that sort of, some days the markets feel really intuitive, other days you have no fucking clue what's going on. How can you tap more into relying on your intuition? Because trying to control the markets and trying to control your emotions and all this sort of stuff in the moment when your dopamine's dysregulated and all this sort of stuff, it's impossible. It's not going to happen. So if you want to tap into that, which if you want to be a successful trader, you're going to need to, then, as I say, the nervous system regulation and dopamine regulation are basically a prerequisite. On a day-to-day basis, a little hack that I've stolen from Atomic Habits on the left here is a habit stacking chart, and what that essentially shows is on a day-to-day basis, as soon as you wake up, if your first choice is a good one, it's a healthy habit. For example, I've just bought a cold plunge, so out there at 6:30 in the morning this morning, freezing my balls off. That's a good choice. Funnily enough, that took me halfway towards a good day. I'm already feeling great. Follow that up with supplements and this and that, you're on your way. Whereas if in the first thing you do when you wake up is you jump on social media, the chances of you being able to recover that are very slim. You're going to have to do a lot of hard work just to sort of like break even on the day, which you don't want to be doing. So I really like that diagram, and yeah, it sort of speaks for itself. So self-explanatory, but habits to in order to achieve decent habit formation, stacking healthy habits, again, exercise, goal setting, journaling, meditation, quality sleep, which we're going to go on to next, balanced diet, creative work, etc. You don't want to maintain destructive habits, excessive screen time, poor diet, inactivity, etc. Going on to one of the main supports, or the most important aspects of supporting your nervous system, would be sleep. Sleep and recovery allow hormone balance, nervous system reset, and memory consolidation. So if you want to retain information from your exposure to lessons, then sleep's important for that. Why it's important: without sufficient recovery, even calm habits fail. When tired, you'll find yourself making rookie mistakes, which I'm pretty sure most people will agree with. And that's because your nervous system never resets. It's still in that stress state because you haven't rested. If you do get good sleep and you look after yourself in that way, you're going to find yourself with better energy, sharper focus, emotional stability, etc. In order to achieve that, you want to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep consistently. Have a wind down routine. For example, for optimal for me, I turn my screens and stuff off at 9:30 p.m. Turn my screens off, phone off downstairs at 9 o'clock, and then I'm trying to go to sleep at 9:30. I'm in bed for 9, asleep for 9:30 when I'm doing the right things. Also good for nervous system reset is like sauna, steam, cold exposure, which we've touched on. You want to avoid irregular sleep, all-nighters, and just generally neglecting recovery. Important note that I feel needs to be covered, because most people sort of sling back and say, I feel fine on 5 to 6 hours, it's, it's just my baseline, etc. It's a common fallacy. People confuse subjective alertness with optimal cognitive performance. Feeling fine doesn't mean that your brain is functioning at its peak. So if you want to be optimal, there's no way around it. As I say, all of your thoughts, all of your decisions, etc., go through your nervous system. So if you're neglecting that recovery, then you're not going to be optimal, and neither are your decisions. So yeah, that is sleep. In order to make decisions or make good decisions, a useful tool that I have, because I like to make things very binary, whenever I'm faced with a decision, even though now it's become more automatic. At first, when I was trying to turn this around, from one of the books I read, I can't remember which one it was, but it basically said that the root of the word good equals beneficial. So therefore, I started asking myself, anytime I was confronted with a decision, I would ask myself, am I better off without it? And that, it's objective, it's not subjective. You answer straight away, mentally, and then it's just up to you to then make that good decision and sort of avoid negative decisions. The aim of this is to gain that nervous system balance, dopamine regulation, start stacking healthy habits and emotional control, etc. The impact, of course, promotes deliberate decision making, which we need for trading, avoids draining, impulsive choices that lead to self-sabotage. Important word there, self-sabotage and draining. If you've indulging too much in dopamine, then you have that peak, and then you have the drop. Within that drop, you're going to be, it might be as something as harmless or seemingly harmless as snacking, or, as we've said before, it could be porn, or it could be weed, or it could be alcohol, it could be any of these things where you're feeling a craving to do that. You should understand that's just like a chemical reaction as a result of what you've done prior, and in order to not have that sort of nagging feeling to reach out for stuff, it's just, you need to have a healthier relationship with dopamine and a more regulated dopamine system. So yeah, in order to achieve decent decision making, or the above aim, pause and ask, am I better off with this or without it, for better lifestyle choices which will reflect on your trading. We want to avoid making poor lifestyle choices and continue with mindless decision making, impulsive behaviors, and chasing instant gratification. Why is all of this sort of important? Because life is uncertain, and the markets are uncertain as well, and uncertainty triggers emotions, which, again, going back into the sympathetic versus parasympathetic states, we're human, so we're going to react a certain way. An important little sort of distinction is, this is especially important for people that were, during their formative years, were in an environment where this wasn't sort of, the parents didn't have this framework created for them. If you grew up in a very stressful environment, or had emotionally unavailable parents and all this sort of stuff, and you were constantly in that fight or flight mode, this stuff's going to be more important than ever. Whereas you might be reading this and going, oh, that seems a little bit over the top. I don't feel the need to jump in an ice bath. Well, hopefully that's because you grew up in a nice, healthy environment, and it's nothing to do with, and basically you've got a healthy system and all this sort of stuff, but don't use that prerequisite as like a reason to overlook what I'm trying to explain. So, back to the point. Markets are uncertain. Uncertainty triggers emotions. The uncertainty in the markets comes from sort of unknown outcomes, financial risk, you know, outside of the markets. It might be you've got dependents, you've got obligations, responsibilities, etc. That adds pressure, and if you've got a lot of pressure, then that's going to expose weaknesses in the system. Again, the point is, only with a balanced nervous system can emotional regulation override impulsivity. So only when you check all of these other boxes are you going to be able to consistently make the right decision. Trader impact. Calm, rational responses to market swings. If you have followed the dopamine regulation and have balanced your nervous system out with healthy sleep, healthy habits, all this sort of stuff. So some healthy habits in order to navigate the uncertainty of the markets would be mindful trading, mindful journaling as well, structured decision making in general. You want to avoid over-checking positions. A big one, negative self-talk. It really doesn't help. And reacting to every market movement. Again, those are all things you'll find yourself doing if you've got a dysregulated system, if you're exposed to too much immediate gratification spikes and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, that's that. I feel like I've regurgitated a few times how it sort of all interlinks, but just from the top: nervous system, regulated nervous system or balanced nervous system, stress versus focus, and I haven't written that very well. Stress versus focus, stress versus calm. Dopamine regulation, stress resilience and patience, sleep and recovery, key to developing that balanced nervous system, which leads to focus and control. Habit formation, that's how you're going to rewire the brain for consistent and deliberate behavior. And then the decision-making lens as well, which is how you're going to consciously filter out or filter through all of your choices. Key insight: neglecting foundational layers, sleep, nervous system, dopamine, etc. will mean high-level skills, habits, emotional regulation, decision-making, etc. are weaker. You want to build this from the bottom up, really. And I feel like some people will sort of dispute this and say, well, I seem to be making progress without this. Yeah, that's fine, but again, this is about sort of like optimization. If you want to spend far longer stressing out and headbutting the same fucking wall over and over again on your trading journey, then by all means ignore this presentation. Whereas if you'd love to get rid of that, the pain points within trading, which most people seem to go in, cycle through for years on years until they sort of figure this out, then, naturally or otherwise, or consciously or otherwise, then this seems to be the shortcut for that. Sipe is like a prime example of this. He does basically all of this stuff to a T. Pretty sure he shared most of this in his book as well. So yeah, that's how it all ties together. Speaking of Sipe in his book, he introduced to me a daily checklist. This is a good way to build on those healthy habits and get into good decision making, etc. Mine has a gratitude section as well. You got your top priorities, and you can go through and just check things off, check off goals and all this sort of stuff. Again, this all leads to being goal orientated and all this sort of stuff. So it's just about moving with direction and moving in general. Quick daily checklist to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, you're putting in movement and exercise. You can put stuff on there about your diet and all this sort of stuff. There's a section down there. You can pencil in sauna, steam, basically pencil in recovery, whether it's sauna, steam, cold plunge, etc. You can have a separate journal for this, or mine has a notes section which you can make some notes in as well. And then you can limit your instant gratification, etc. I'm not saying abstain from things completely, but if you want to watch YouTube shorts like I do, you can. I'm not saying that I do this, but it's just about limiting that time. For me personally, in doing that, I have a time limit on my phone, so it's 15-minute intervals. I'll go on it and watch YouTube shorts, and then it'll flag up that's been 15 minutes, and I can close that and resume being productive. So that's the daily planner real quick. Diet is obviously huge. I'll just run through this real quickly. For stable energy and focus, you want high protein foods, eggs, chickens, fish, legumes, Greek yogurt, etc. This supports neurotransmitter synthesis, dopamine, serotonin, satiety, pass, and sustained energy. Low refined sugar, another big one. Avoiding sweets, candies, pastries, etc. This prevents blood sugar spikes, crashes, emotional trading, and fatigue. So be cognizant of what you're having for breakfast and all this sort of stuff. You'd rather go next section, complex carbs in moderation. You want to be having something that's balanced. Complex carbs for slow energy release, steady focus during trading hours, protein, and avoiding or low refined sugar, generally avoiding sugar prior to and during a trading session, just to give yourself the best chance of not tipping into that sympathetic state. You can also take some supplements, that's the next slide, in order to give some cognitive support or cognitive boost. You can take supplements like omega-3s. Again, supplements is next slide. Omega-3s, rich foods, salmons, walnuts, flax seeds, etc. This supports brain structure, focus and memory, etc. Colourful vegetables and fruits, spinach, berries, peppers, the antioxidants within which reduce oxidative stress and improve mental clarity, and then hydration, water, herbal teas, etc. If you drink coffee, balance that out with water because coffee dehydrates. Mild dehydration can lead to impaired attention, slower decision making, etc. And then finally, stress and recovery support from the diet. Magnesium-rich foods, nuts, seeds, leafy greens, etc. This helps relax muscles, improve sleep, and activate the parasympathetic system. Finally, fermented foods, probiotics, yogurts. The last two I can't stand, kimchi, sauerkraut. And this is the gut-brain axis, supports mood, cognition, and stress resilience. So balanced diet plays into this more than you might think. I got into the habit of having a breakfast bowl which looked super healthy but was packed with sugars, and although it's healthy sugars, like 60-70 grams of sugar is still sugar. So since throwing that out, I've had a lot more clarity in the markets and all that sort of stuff. So again, if maybe you weren't aware of some of this stuff, hopefully bringing it to your attention so you can make some alterations so you can again get that clarity of mind. Mentioned it twice by mistake in the previous slide. You can also take supplements, which I do, to boost your optimal state. Cognitive and focus support, as mentioned, omega-3s. B vitamins, which I don't take because I'm pretty sure they fuck with my skin. B6, B12, folate. That's for energy metabolism and neurotransmitter synthesis. Energy and stress resilience. Magnesium, which I take before sleep, alongside another one I can't remember. I'll put that in the chat. Rhodiola and adaptogens, mild stress buffering, helps maintain focus under pressure. I have taken rhodiola before but didn't notice a huge difference. Maybe I'll try another supplement brand. L-theanine I take religiously, and that mixed with caffeine is like a super combo. Promotes alert focus without jitteriness. Speaking on caffeine just quickly, I won't beat it to death, but too much caffeine is horrendous for you. I've put it into ChatGPT to see what a meaningful amount is, so that you're taking the amount that is going to give you all of the benefits without the afternoon slump and all this sort of stuff, which comes into timing and this and that as well. Stealing from Andrew Huberman, you want to wait between 60 and 90 minutes after you wake up before you start taking caffeine and whatnot. And then I can't remember the amount of milligrams of caffeine, but I have 11 grams of espresso grounds in the morning, just with 100 milliliters of water, and that's my morning coffee, and that's all I'll do caffeine wise for the whole day. And I never feel the need for any more. More supplements for recovery and overall health. Vitamin D for mood regulation and immune support. Need that in sunny Britain. Protein and amino acids. Supports energy, muscle maintenance, and dopamine synthesis. So I'll say the next one, then I'll talk about my morning supplement stack. Electrolytes, hydration, and mental performance during intense sessions. So each morning I have my electrolytes. With that I have creatine and MCT oil, and then alongside that I'll have half a scoop of protein powder with water, and then that's basically my breakfast. And then I'll knock back my coffee after that. And that sees me through London. And then I usually just snack on some almonds throughout the session, though I need to buy some more. So again, this is all stuff that you can do in order to sort of make sure your brain's well calibrated and ready for the day. Let me take a drink. Fucking hell, I've been reeling off for half an hour. Right, we're getting there. In fact, this is the final slide. The hack, the best bit, and this is something that I discovered in, I think this is maybe November, December. I bought myself a Whoop wristband. If you're close to me, you'll have heard me, or I've probably forced you to get one. But basically it's a trackable device, and tracks health metrics and all that sort of stuff. Most people will be familiar with tracking steps and all this sort of stuff, and the basic stuff, but the main one here obviously can track all your sleep and everything, which we've said why that's important, but the main one is heart rate variance, and that's like a key indicator of where you're at on where your nervous system's at, in terms of whether you're going to be in a parasympathetic state versus a sympathetic state. If you've got high HRV, that's strong parasympathetic. If you've got low, then that's sympathetic, and then you're going to have the sympathetic dominance is where you're going to be stressed, impulsive, poor decision making, etc. So having the data and the key insights, I'll jump back onto the slide. Having the data and the key insights means you're no longer guessing your recovery and energy levels. You might feel fine subjectively, but your body internally is screaming, and it's just because your baseline is, if you got this Whoop and you were tracking it, maybe your HRV would be 50-60% of where it could be, or even less possibly, if your diet wasn't good, supplements weren't good, sleep was arse, all this sort of stuff contributes to where you're at on that parasympathetic or on that what's the word? I'm getting tired now. Well, basically where your nervous system's at and how it's recovered. This is your key indicator and your key insight to this, and it's not subjective. It's data. It's facts. Other key indicators: resting heart rate, but the HRV is the main one. And going back to the first slide, it's like the linchpin on how you're going to operate on a day-to-day basis. Respiratory rate, blood oxygen levels, skin temperature, all of that sort of stuff. Tracks your steps, tracks your sleep. You can, the way that I use it, I'll go into a gym, or when I go to the gym, you track your session. It'll give you a strain goal to make sure you don't sort of overdo it. In my case, to be honest, I've started doing a lot more cardio since getting this, because I realized I was leaving so much on the table. And then in order to boost your HRV and all of your metrics, etc., you want to be spending time in the whole range of cardio zones, so getting in your zone 2, zone 4, 5, all that sort of stuff, which I wasn't really doing any of. I was just going into the gym and lifting weights, and one of the main changes I made was I started doing cardio at the end of my sessions, 20 minutes on the Stairmaster, or until my strain target was met, and my alertness and all that good stuff just started shooting up. So yeah, there's no plug there, no affiliation, but highly recommend getting one. Yeah, that is the presentation. I'm aware that I've been speaking very quickly. I've saved you from having to put it on fast forward. I'll post this with the presentation so you can look for it yourself. Disclaimer: this isn't all of my guru mind knowledge. This is all basically ChatGPT and an accumulation of my thoughts and questions slammed into a presentation, so I'm not going to take full credit for it. So yeah, hope that's helpful. Hope that you get something out of it and start living healthier and trading better. Peace and love as always. Take care.